insulting me is a badge of honor for me, but I think we all know, as both as a educator for a couple decades and as a parent, using that term is just so damaging. It's hurtful. We have fought 3 decades to get this out of our schools. Kids know better than to use it. But look, this is what Donald Trump has done.
Is happening. I just don't think that you need to go the extra mile and make a claim as extreme as they're funding a terrorist group in Somalia until you have the goods, until you can actually prove that's happening. And let's also keep in mind that the U.S. government does a good enough job stealing our money to fund foreign terror groups as it is. So maybe there should be some ire directed toward the U.S.
You're not ready for this storm. Kasparian just hit the accelerator and sent Tim Walz careening across the internet amid an alleged Somali fraud scandal. Proofs are stacking up fast. Her sarcasm cuts sharper than a knife, and those sidelong looks convey more than any speech ever could. Stories shift in real time. Excuses crumble, and the spin cycle completely breaks down. Is this political commentary the perfect takedown, or the point where everything begins to unravel? Pop your popcorn, brace yourself, and watch as hard questions meet real pressure. Because silence never stays silent. It erupts loud, fast, and unforgettable.
Minnesota in particular.
At first it was Minnesota, but then it was later reported.
It's all 50 states?
All 50 states, they have to provide evidence that,
Oh, I didn't realize that he brought in.
Yeah, so basically law-abiding,
okay, maybe
child
that's a little bit overboard. I thought it was 100%. Just that state.
Yeah, that is overboard. I want to be clear about something. Due to the massive amount of COVID aid that flowed into states across the country, fraud has been a problem, not just in Minnesota, but all across the country. In fact,
if this excites you, hit subscribe. It matters more than you think. The instant Kasparian zeroes in on Tim Walz, the atmosphere flips. From calm breakdown to a meticulously orchestrated demolition, delivered with a grin, rich context, and relentless irony.
Off of something that broke earlier this year in November, there was a huge story that was published in the New York Times about fraud cases in the Minneapolis area. And most of these, nonprofits or these little businesses that were popping up and basically benefiting from COVID era public money were Somali owned. Now, 2 things are happening at the same time. On one hand, these fraud cases appear to be very serious and very real.
This is a negotiation, debate, or a polite misunderstanding to smooth over. It's a one-way showdown with Tim Walz strapped into his own talking points while Anna drives them straight off the credibility cliff.
Another day. Okay, so a YouTuber named Nick Shirley uncovered tens and arguably even he claims $100 million of fraud in Minnesota under Governor Tim Walz's.
Tim Walz walks in wearing the familiar guise of a Midwestern everyman politician. The kind who looks like he should be discussing corn yields or congratulating the high school marching band.
Bad faith actors who might be using this for terrible political purposes. The fact remains that it appears that close to $9 billion, according to prosecutors, have been stolen from taxpayers in the Minneapolis area as a result of these fraudulent businesses. And I want to give you more details about it in just a second. But before I do, Cenk, your 2 cents.
But that wholesome persona offers no shield when hard questions pile up like overdue bills. Anna treats the image as mere decoration, not substance. Good vibes can't replace actual leadership when accountability starts slipping. The Somali fraud story doesn't quietly disappear, and Anna ensures it's front and center. An elephant in the room. Walz keeps pretending is furniture. His repeated "everything's under control" statements start to sound less like assurance and more like wishful thinking, especially when control appears to mean dodging follow-ups. Anna never raises her voice. The facts carry the weight while her sarcasm cleans up the mess.
Be under the assumption, and this was, I guess, a terrible assumption to have because it's not true, that there would be a recalibration of some of these policies in order to actually serve the best interests of the American people. But what I've noticed, certainly on a local level, is that there's absolutely no self-reflection, no recalibration of said policies. And on a national level, there seems to be more interest in serving the egos and, the narcissism of Democratic.
Any attempt to obscure the matter with bureaucratic jargon is handled like a magician's never-ending scarf trick. Impressive at first glance, but it never truly ends. Tim Walz's dependence on procedure and administrative steps becomes a running gag, not because the rules don't matter, but because repeating them feels like hiding behind paperwork. Anna slices through this tactic precisely, showing that complexity does not equal responsibility and confusion does not equal innocence. The critique sharpens as she highlights the gap between his polished public image and his performance under pressure. The same leader known for calm authority now seems adrift. Anna frames this as a political branding case study gone wrong. Promises of transparency made, delivery rarely seen. The humor escalates as every clarification only deepens confusion, turning reassurance into an unwelcome service. Tim Walz isn't cast as a villain, but perhaps something more insidious in politics, a leader surprised that accountability never sleeps.
Emphasize childcare centers where Shirley shows up during weekday business hours to find that there are actually no children present. There are also some pretty extreme claims that we need more evidence for, which I'll get into in just a second. So a claim was just kind of casually made about how this money is then being siphoned off and sent over to Al-Shabaab, a terrorist group that operates out of Somalia. Now, there hasn't been any evidence provided.
As the roast continues, Anna Kasparian eases just enough to make one thing crystal clear. This isn't an attack on any group. No matter how narratives try to shift focus, the Somali community isn't the target. If anything, they're caught in the crossfire of political mismanagement and systemic failure. Anna emphasizes that using marginalized groups as shields isn't just ineffective, it's disrespectful, especially when the core issue is leadership and accountability. Tim Walz's overall record enters the conversation naturally, not as distraction, but as context that makes the situation feel even more surreal. This is a governor often praised for steady crisis handling, now struggling to answer why simple questions feel like personal attacks. Anna treats that contradiction like a gift, showing that leadership is measured not in calm moments, but in how problems are confronted when pressure mounts. The critique sharpens as she examines the media around Tim Walz, where silence and minimization seem deliberate rather than accidental. Coverage that tiptoes around controversy begins to feel like reputation management over journalism. Anna dismantles that approach, pointing out that selective outrage is still outrage, especially when it conveniently appears during fundraising season.
The Department of Health and Human Services has decided to effectively punish all childcare centers in the state of Minnesota by halting federal childcare payments toward the state. And of course, this is over allegations that some of these childcare centers are engaging in fraud. Now, Deputy HHS Secretary Jim O'Neill said in a post on X that funds will be released only when states prove they are being spent legitimately.
Meanwhile, Tim Walz's carefully filtered statements, laced with legal caution and political restraint, read like a masterclass in speaking at length without committing. Anna meets this verbal gymnastics with visible skepticism, making it clear leadership requires more than avoiding responsibility-laden language. His constant references to investigations, reviews, and ongoing processes start to sound like a lullaby designed to soothe public concern rather than solve issues. Anna then shifts focus to trust, not as emotion, but as political currency that loses value fast when mismanaged. Tim Walz's credibility gap isn't a sudden collapse, but a slow accumulation of moments where clarity was optional and evasion convenient. Her sarcasm cuts deepest here, exposing how easily trust is treated as renewable, even when evidence suggests otherwise. Other aspects of governance are examined too, from past rhetoric on ethics to policy priorities. These are mentioned ironically as reminders of standards that now feel inconvenient. Anna lets his own cultivated values quietly indict the present without ever needing direct accusation.
So over and over again, you'll see them go visit various childcare facilities and you'll see that there's no one there. There are no children. And sometimes they'll find workers there and they'll ask some questions. The workers are very evasive. And I should note that while, yes, it is true that prosecutors have already been investigating similar fraud cases in the area, and there have already been arrests. What's important to know about the businesses that were visited by Shirley and David here, we're still receiving.
The Somali fraud scandal remains central, resurfacing repeatedly, not as filler, but as proof that unresolved problems don't vanish. Anna makes clear unanswered questions don't expire, no matter how confidently ignored. Tim Walz's hope that time will fix transparency failures is optimistic but misguided. As the roast advances, Anna dismantles the idea that criticism equals hostility, framing skepticism as a democratic expectation rather than personal attack. Tim Walz's defensive stance seems to reveal a misunderstanding of leadership, as if accountability were optional. The humor stays sharp yet disciplined, never chaotic, because facts remain in control. Gradually, the tone shifts from relentless satire to quiet warnings wrapped in irony. Anna notes political careers rarely end with one scandal, but are eroded by how those scandals are handled. Tim Walz isn't finished, but shown wobbling under the weight of his own non-answers. The critique relies not on exaggeration, but on the uncomfortable truth that branding can't outrun reality forever.
Indicating that certain requirements would need to be met before federal grants are approved for childcare programs in all states, not just Minnesota. With that in mind, let's take a look at what he had to say.
I have activated our Defend the Spend system for all ACF childcare payments across America. Starting today, we require a justification, receipt, or photo evidence before we make a payment. Second, I have just signed and sent a demand letter to Governor Walz. I required a full 360 review.
The audience is left entertained, informed, and aware this was never just a discussion. It was a methodical takedown. Anna refuses to let Tim Walz hide behind respectability politics, where titles and past achievements function like immunity. She treats his office not as protection, but amplification. Higher positions make unanswered questions louder. Every attempt to pivot toward legacy or intention is calmly redirected back to consequences. It's as if she reminds viewers that sincerity cannot substitute accountability. The spotlight shows Tim Walz's strategy resembling someone rearranging furniture during a fire drill, believing order distracts from danger. Anna sharpens the metaphor, revealing how repetition replaces resolution and official reassurances become background noise. Promises of audits and reviews begin to sound less like plans, more like stalling tactics. She reinforces a hard truth. Modern political decline rarely arrives with drama. It seeps quietly through slow credibility erosion, long after headlines fade.
Of the Minnesota Department of Children, Youth, and Families said none of the 10 childcare centers that YouTuber Nick Shirley recently visited for his viral video had their payments paused, although a couple were previously closed down by the state, and state workers are doing visits to the rest today. So these facilities, even though there was prior knowledge by the state that there was fraud going on, these facilities were still receiving these government grants.
The contrast sharpens when Anna compares Tim Walz's situation to ordinary citizen standards. When everyday people mishandle funds or oversight, consequences come quickly and without mercy. In politics, similar failures are reframed as learning experiences. Her restrained sarcasm exposes this imbalance without raising her voice, highlighting accountability weakening near power. Tim Walz's insistence on calm authority begins to feel rehearsed, like a safety briefing amid smoke. Anna frames composure not as confidence, but as insulation, distancing leadership from responsibility. The message is clear. Steadiness without substance is stillness pretending to be strength. The roast dismantles the notion that survival equals vindication, showing unresolved questions don't vanish with elections or polls. Tim Walz may remain in office, but his story carries a permanent asterisk.
By the photo evidence, like what is that going to prove? He says upon receipt of payment. What do you want a photo of? Do you want photos of children at the daycare centers? I don't know. There was a lack of clarity there. I personally don't have any problem whatsoever with increased oversight of how public money is being spent, because it is true that fraud is a problem, not just in Minnesota, but fraud has been a huge problem in many states, as I've mentioned, California being one of them, because there was this massive infusion of COVID era money from the federal government to the states in order to keep people whole as, shutdowns were taking place and people were losing their jobs. That's always going to, unfortunately,
Even silence becomes part of the critique. Anna treats omissions as statements, turning what isn't addressed into evidence of what's avoided. Tim Walz's reluctance to face specifics is presented as a choice, not a limitation, choices that follow leaders indefinitely. As the roast nears its end, Anna underscores leadership isn't avoiding mistakes, but confronting them before they become distressed. Handling of the Somali fraud scandal is a cautionary tale of image management outpacing transparency. The humor sparks laughter, but fades into discomfort. No neat resolution is offered, because unresolved controversies rarely resolve. Anna leaves Tim Walz suspended between authority and accountability, where charm cannot outrun scrutiny, and patience thins with each recycled explanation. The roast doesn't reduce everything to ashes, but leaves visible scorch marks, showing silence, deflection, and carefully chosen words are never neutral in the public eye. Trust is at stake.